Welcome again, everyone, to Privacy is Like a Box of Cookies, brought to you by Red Clover Advisors. I'm Jodi Daniels. I'm the CEO and founder and privacy consultant here at Red Clover. And we are so excited to continue our snack-like sized webinar series. So we promise you a lot jam-packed into 30 minutes. And to kick us off, we have a poll to give us a little bit of understanding where everyone is in the cookie universe. So I do hope that you've grabbed your cookie for maybe it's your breakfast, snack, or lunch, and we're going to get started here. So our very first poll question to kick us off is, how often do you check the cookie consent software to see if it's working properly? We thank you for your participation. Few more moments to have a couple more of you continue your votes. Okay, so where have we landed? I'm going to share the results here. Hopefully everyone can see those. It looks like we have an even split almost between never doing it, twice a year, quarterly, and some of you are doing it monthly. Well, thank you so much for participating. We really appreciate that. So let's dive on in to our webinar and what we're going to cover here today. First, we're going to cover some of the cookie law requirements. Then we're going to dive into cookie consent software. So thank you again for participating in our short poll. We're going to really try and have some discussions about dark patterns and global privacy control, and then cookie extras, where we have a variety of different examples to walk you through what might be a good example and maybe the ones to not follow. Now, if you follow on social media, you know I love chocolate chip cookies, and we did try and entice you on that front slide with a variety of different kinds, but in the universe of digital advertising, we actually are speaking about strictly necessary cookies, preference cookies, statistic cookies, and marketing cookies. Now, in the universe of cookies, strictly necessary are not strictly necessary that we think they should be, but are truly strictly necessary to make the website work. These are the ones that you get to fire first. It is okay for these to continue to work even if someone says reject cookies. Now, again, it's not because you want them to be strictly necessary. They actually really have to be strictly necessary for the function of the site. The rest of these here, marketing, these might be our targeted advertising. Statistics might be where we have analytics cookies. Most common is Google Analytics, a lot of Adobe Analytics, and some others. And then preference cookies are things like region and languages. Our marketing and statistics are really the ones that tend to give some users, or some companies rather, some trouble. So let's continue on what you need to know about cookies and pixels. The first is that not all requirements are created equal. There are some companies who decide, I want to take the most strict requirement of it being an opt-in philosophy globally or in multiple regions. And at the same time, I want people to understand that is a choice that you can certainly make. It's not a requirement. There are people in the United States, many of the laws require some type of cookie opt-out, cookie notice, cookie disclosure. There's a lot that we're going to cover here, but we're really not in an opt-in scenario in the US for the traditional marketing and analytics cookies. Now, one of the really tricky things in the land of cookies is sale of data. We've talked many times before about the Sephora case. It is one of the preeminent cases that talks about sale of data. And many other states, that was under California, and many other states have joined the party when it comes to sale, in quotes, of data. Sale does not have to mean I gave someone $1 and then there was an exchange. It could be for other valuable consideration. You can see the states so far that we have here on the left-hand side that agree with this concept that California started with the sharing of data to a third party for monetary or other valuable consideration. Now, not all states agree with this, and so those to our right Iowa, Tennessee, Indiana, Virginia, and Utah are in the belief, nope, it's only for monetary consideration. In the universe of cookies, this means we have to start paying attention to the left side of the screen. And on our next slide, we're going to talk about the specifics of what a sale of data means. Now, this is yet again, you can start to see the nuances and differences among states. And people always ask, well, how are companies practically dealing with this? One of the ways they're doing this is they really aren't separating by state. I do have a few clients where they only let the Californians this way, and Jodi in Georgia, who still has no privacy rights yet. But there was a Georgia privacy law introduced last week, so we'll see what happens. But today I have no rights. And so there are some companies who exclude me from everything that we're talking about today. As we continue to have a growing list of states, there are more and more companies, though, who are taking a universal approach, at least with a US focus, and then everyone else outside the US focus. Now, what does this wholesale thing mean? Well, first, you're going to need to understand the types of pixels you have on your site to determine, do you fall into scope for that sale? Now, hint, hint, if any of you are using a traditional social media pixel for any kind of targeted advertising, or a Google Analytics pixel, or another similar type of analytics pixel where the third party gets to use that data for themselves as well as for you, then the answer is most likely yes. The interpretation by the Attorney General or the CPPA in California is that these types of pixels are considered a sale of data. This means you have to make sure that your privacy notice has the right language. You can't say, I don't sell data, if you actually might qualify for sale of data. You also have to make sure you have the right opt-out links. And on the homepage, we're going to talk about what those opt-out links need to be in a moment. Earlier this morning, I was reviewing a privacy notice where that company has advertising and analytics pixels, and their website notice had no way to opt out of those, and also said that they didn't qualify for a sale of data. However, they did qualify for a sale of data, and we have to make sure we have the opt-out link. One of the areas I want to make sure that you're aware of is if any of your companies take personal information like an email and upload it into a social media tool for lookalike targeting or for more advanced targeted advertising, the opt-out of only being just at a cookie level may not be enough for you, and you might need to make sure that your form also covers do not sell my personal information, and you'll need a process behind that to make sure that you are properly opting out. Now, let's review a little bit state by state. So in California, you need to make sure that you have the right to opt out of sale or sharing of personal information. I've mentioned this do not sell or share my personal information link. Now note, in California, you're also allowed to use the Your Privacy Rights logo, and many companies are using that language in the icon that you can grab from the California Attorney General instead of do not sell or share my personal information. But I also have companies that prefer do not sell or share my personal information. Now, if you happen to have any kind of sensitive information, don't forget about that link as well. Virginia just wants you to have a right to opt out of targeted advertising and the sale of personal data, as well as profiling. Colorado is a little bit closer to California, where it wants the right to opt out also of targeted advertising and have a link, which is why so many people like this Your Privacy Rights, because it allows you to link to your cookie settings and cover that targeted advertising piece. Connecticut, pretty similar to Colorado, but a few nuances. You will have access to these slides. I don't want to read all of them to you. Utah is one of the more business-friendly states, so it just says you need to have a way for me to opt out. This is often in the privacy notice, and this is one that is sale of data, true monetary only. And then GDPR actually doesn't really cover specifically sale of data quite the way that the states are focused on it, and GDPR is an opt-in philosophy. We've continued to list all of our states over here. We have Oregon, Texas, Montana, Iowa, Delaware, and Tennessee. The common theme, as we tried to display for you on the prior pages, are making sure you have an opt-out in your privacy notice. If you have one of those opt-out links like we've described, like Your Privacy Choices, it allows me to opt out of the targeted advertising and analytics and any other third-party pixels. You will be in a good place. And we will have these slides for you to dive in and read all the fine nuances. I really want to focus, though, on getting to the cookie consent software and some of the examples. So one of the other items before we shift gears that I want to mention for a moment is profiling. So the definition of profiling is actually different across the different states. It will be very important for you to work with your marketing teams to really understand not only the pixels that they have on the site, and I use the word pixel, tag, they're technically slightly different definitions, but for our purpose, really similar. You want to understand what pixels they have that are dropping the cookies and how that data is being used by the third party, like the social media site or the ad platform, and then how the company is also using that information, because that connection might be profiling. And the difference is it 100% automated where decisions are being made from that, or is there any manual intervention? When there's a manual intervention, it often means one thing, and when it's automated, it means something different. Now, let's dive into the cookie consent software piece. Many of you mentioned that this is something that we are not looking at all the time. I'm very excited about the team. So let's focus on the cookie team. Who should be a part of this entire conversation that we're talking about? Well, maybe you're part of the privacy and legal part of your organization. However, you need your friends in marketing to also join us. And sometimes the marketing team doesn't actually own the placement of the pixels or how all of that is set up. And so we need our web development teams and potentially our IT teams as well. Who actually will own a cookie consent tool for your organization? I have seen everyone on this slide be owners of that tool. It's really important to have a specific owner who is responsible to perform that ongoing review and make sure it's working properly. For anyone here who's working with an ad agency, they also need to be part of the conversation. If you're not aware, many of ad agencies have access to what's called a container tag. Think of it like a basket. Let's use a cookie jar because we're in a cookie conversation actually. So imagine there's a cookie jar on your site, and then the ad agency has the ability to add pixels all day long, whenever it wants to, into that cookie jar. If this team here is not aware of what is happening or how often, then that could be increased risk and exposure for the company, which is why setting up some type of review and understanding the access levels that these agencies have or marketing teams is incredibly important. And we highly recommend some type of standard to explain here's what is allowed and not allowed. And then the review process to manage whatever the standard actually says. Well, all cookie consent managers are not the same. And to continue our fun analogy, we have the basic chocolate chip cookie. It might not take a lot of skill to make, but it is very important to get a good, soft, but crispy one. And then we, of course, have our delicate French macaroon, which is involved and requires quite a lot. That is actually more in line with our cookie consent requirements because they're complicated. When you're going shopping for one or making sure that you have it set up properly, here's what you need to make sure that everyone responsible is aware of. Is it easy to use? What are the geolocation settings? We started this by saying that not all cookie law requirements are actually the same. Some are opt-in and some are opt-out. Some organizations want to have geolocation settings on and some want to treat them all the same. What is important for you as an organization and how can you set that up? How can you scan the site for any new pixels and cookies that are dropping and making sure that you have the right level of information? How can you categorize these cookies? And how many cookies do you have on the site that will require categorization? For example, do you have marketing cookies, analytics cookies, strictly necessary cookies, unknown cookies? We just finished a cookie review. It had over 250 cookies and we needed to categorize. And when we first got started, there were like 200 that weren't categorized. And we kept working it down 60, then 50, then 30, then 11. And because we had that cookie team earlier, we were able to ultimately get all of them properly categorized. Without them being properly categorized, you're not in compliance with all the different requirements. You want to be able to customize your banner. This is where your brand and your tone are going to be important, as well as actually having the right disclosures. The software should be able to help you with universal consent mechanism, which is often global privacy control. They all are priced a little bit different. So you want to find the one that's going to work best for you. Is it by domain? Is it by user? Is it by impressions? Is it by the volume that goes through it? And then support. How much support will you need? This is also going to be dependent by how many domains you have, how many pixels you have on the site, and how often all of that gets changed. Being able to manage and maintain it on an ongoing basis is going to be really important for you. So when we're setting up our cookie banner and our consent settings, what should we consider? We have a lot of considerations for you. First is you want to understand the different kinds of cookies that you have. Advertising, analytics, social media, for example. Do you also have session replay cookies like Full Story, Hotjar, Lucky Orange? There's a long list of them. Session replay cookies are part of what are creating a lot of havoc right now in the pixel litigation suits. You need to understand what kinds of cookies and then be able to say what you're using them for. Do you have targeted and personal advertising? Do you have analytics? Do you have a better customer experience? Are you using them to display the content on the page? You're going to want to link to the cookie settings. You're going to want to make sure that they're symmetrical. We're going to have a lot of thoughts about symmetrical. This is where dark patterns come into play. We also need to have a link to the privacy policy. And one of the big questions is who should get the banner? Jodi's in Georgia. Jodi gets a lot of banners. Jodi takes a lot of screenshots of banners because that's what all privacy professionals do all day long is we take screenshots of cookie banners. But in all seriousness, should I get one or should I not? That goes back to how your strategy is going to be for complying with these laws, or when there is no law, how you will treat all the individuals coming to your sites. We talked about some actually solutions will require special configuration for Google Tag Manager. So make sure if you use Google Tag Manager, you know how to use that. And how will cookie updates work? Will it be an auto scan? Is it a behind the scenes scan? Is it a once a week, a once a month? What is the scan going to be? And how will you adjust your process to any of the findings in there? It is not okay to just say we use cookies, not a good option. Now, we have kind of an example banner over here with some language. Of course, like all good webinars, really make sure that you're talking to a privacy professional or legal counsel before you just borrow any cookie banner language that you see. A couple other do's and don'ts. Make sure it is a clear explanation of the type of cookies being used. List the cookies being used, and please consider the mobile experience. Many times people are on mobile and the cookie banner should not cover the entire mobile page. Now, on the other side, we also want to make sure that we don't block the home page. The cookie banner should not block my ability to get to any part of the site. We do want to explain all of our options. We want to make it clear for someone to be able to change their consent. Many of the laws, when opt in, should be the same amount of steps to opt out. And we want to make sure that our banner and our cookie notice disclosure is explaining our use of cookies. We're going to talk more about dark patterns here in a moment. I am on a please don't block the homepage or content banner kick. There's actually a particular company that I have come across. There's no X on the banner. The whole page is blocked. And then I have to go and manually opt out of every single category possible. That really is a dark pattern. And then you want to consider what the right amount of frequency is to reset the banner. Is it once a month, once a week, once a year? So you want to not prompt too frequently and find the right balance for your organization. Something else that's also really important is the different categories that you have. So here's just kind of an example of a OneTrust banner. You can see here on the right-hand side that when I would have clicked the settings on the right, they're all off and I'd have to mark them all on. At the very bottom, do we see here how in this settings part, there's a reject all? We're finding that more states want to have this reject all button in the settings piece as well, not only on the banner, but also here in the settings. So this is a feature to make sure that you have turned on. We love ourselves a good cookie audit. Now, when you have them all set up, how often should you perform this audit? Well, when you do it, you're going to want to look, and this is a great thing to do before you release it. Do you have the right cookie banner language? Do you have the right consent settings? Is it actually working? Test your banner, test your cookie consent settings. Make sure it all actually works. Is everything categorized? Do you have a cookie policy, those dark patterns, and that global privacy control? So let's talk about those dark patterns. This is making waves in a lot of conversations right now. You can kind of see different states are taking different approaches to dark patterns. Some states are really not focusing on it too much. The Federal Trade Commission is also very focused on dark patterns, not just in privacy, but in advertising overall. You want to look for one of the easiest dark patterns is, am I trying to encourage a user to do what is in the best interest for the company as opposed to what's in the best interest of the individual? This often shows up with our examples at the bottom. Do you have a button in a particular color that is highlighted? Do you have the button different size fonts? A lot of times you'll see accept in a really lovely color and the reject in something different, or even a box or an outline around it. Instead, what we want is just symmetry. They need to really be completely equal so that we're not guiding someone along the way at all. You also want to make sure that you're not forcing someone to interact with the banner. I really should be able to make the banner go away. And especially here in the United States, where it's an opt-out philosophy. And so that blocking of the page where I can't get to it, and then I had to click multiple different times, that can also be considered a dark pattern. And then think about your audience that might be coming and how is it presented? What are the colors? What are the size of the fonts? Is it easy to read? All of that's going to be really important to make sure that you wouldn't fall in a dark pattern. But the buttons, the size are some of the areas we see companies making common mistakes. So we've talked a little bit about this, but I wanted to kind of just bring it up again, which is around that sale piece. Here's the Privacy Choices link and the little logo. You can head to the California Attorney General's office or CPPA to find that beautiful logo. And global privacy control is one of the areas that you're also going to want to make sure you have set up and is working properly. Each of the different cookie tools have it as a slightly different process and setup. I cannot emphasize enough testing your cookie banners and cookie consent software often before it goes live and then on some type of regular basis. Websites change, websites plugins come in, new pages are created, and these things break. New pixels are added, they need to be properly categorized, and many times over, we see information getting collected in cookies that shouldn't. We see that the global privacy control isn't actually working properly, or I hit reject and nothing's actually rejecting. You're still collecting all of the information. Those are all the items that anyone from the outside can test. Anyone can see that. And we want to make sure that they can't, that you're doing it properly. So what does this mean? Well, review your current cookie consent setup, perform regular cookie audits. The audit should be walking through all the parts, the banner, the reject and accept. Is it actually functioning properly? Is the banner firing properly? Do I have the right words on the page? Do I have this global privacy control button thing set on? And again, do I have the categorization happening? And is it current? Because our sites are changing all the time. We want to make sure that we're current. Create cookie standards. We really believe in having a policy and a process in place. This also allows you to either create standards that people need to adhere to, the ability to test those standards by another part of the organization or bring in an external firm to kind of do that audit, and privacy controls. It's also a way for departments to be self-sufficient. So create some type of cookie standard, cookie policy to be able to do that. Highly emphasize again that quality assurance process for revisiting the cookie consent setup. Also, don't forget about the recruiting pages. A lot of times we're so focused on our main sites. Many times over, there are all kinds of advertising and analytics pixels showing up on our recruiting sites and our career pages to recruit talent. And we need to make sure that we have that applicable over there as well. And the laws keep changing because new ones keep coming along, and interpretations and new pixel lawsuits keep joining the party. So as a result, we have to make sure that you're staying up to date. I thank you for joining us here today. And we're going to do some cookie extras where I'm going to walk you through some good ones and some maybe not as good ones. I do want to launch a really quick poll, though, on privacy notices. So I've talked a lot about how you have to make sure that your cookies are updated in your privacy notice. You need the do not sell information section. You need to make sure that you have the right opt-outs in place. If you didn't know, all the social media platforms and major players also all require that you have the ability for a user to opt out in your privacy notice. You want to explain the kind of cookies you have in your privacy notice. And maybe you're using inferences or profiling. That also needs to be in your privacy notice. So how often are you reviewing your privacy notice for marketing activities? Thank you so much for participating. I'm going to close this out here in just a moment. All right, so sharing the results, it looks like we have a much bigger split here, kind of across. So when there's a new law is annually. So everyone's doing it once a year. That's good because California and many of the other states require that once a year. When there's a new law, that's a good trigger. And those of you who have a quarterly or monthly and each new initiative, kudos to you. I'd love to see for each new marketing initiative to really be the leader, then monthly, then quarterly, then when there's no law, and annually. So thank you again for participating. So let's share some goods and maybe not so goods. Actually, very, very quickly, if you are not familiar with Ghostery, you can have a lot of fun with this tool. You'll never look at any other website the same. You can go to a particular tool or any page. This is a free plugin. And you can see all the different trackers that are here. There's multiple ones that are out there. Ghostery is one of the leaders. We like it a lot. Privacy Badger is another one. And you can block and restrict, but it's a great way to quickly see what kind of pixels are on the site. We also have some scanning tips for really technical people. I'm going to kind of fast forward through this. This is a really tactical piece for anyone who's here or anyone on the team to make sure your scans to identify the cookies and the categories are properly found. Now, here's a couple good examples. So there was a particular art museum that I went to. They just had this. There's just I accept. There's no reject. There's no real way for me to do cookie settings. Starbucks. Now, do keep in mind, most of these are going to be from what I can see here. We did not always VPN in, so we wanted you to have a good experience to see what's out there. Starbucks had agree and change cookie settings. I would personally like to see the reject also here, but what I do like is that they use their branding, their colors. It's really clear language, and they had a little fun with their brand. Some others, this one's really long, so some people might say, well, this is very wordy. It is very clear what is actually happening in this banner. Here's what happens when you do accept. Here's what happens when you do reject. I'm getting linked to their cookie settings, their privacy policy. Reject and accept have no dark patterns, and I have cookie settings. Over here on the right, I like the use. It's very visual. They have different size headers. They're using bullets and check marks. Then more of the language and the technical piece is below. So they've given the summary, the high points, and then the really specific technical underneath. Really nice lowercase language here to just make it user-friendly and easy on the eyes. And again, no symmetry in here, so no dark patterns. You can kind of see again, more no dark patterns where we have reject and accept. One of the things you might be noticing is reject optional. Because the reality is you can't actually reject a strictly necessary. And we're seeing more and more companies go with reject optional because of that concept. You also see here your opt-out preference signal is honored. This is what someone would get with the global privacy control marked on. The site has to honor that. The site is allowed to say, would you like to accept our cookies? If not, there's nothing else I would really need to do because it honored the signal. Yeah, could use a little bit of extra help. So here we just have accept. I don't have reject, and it doesn't explain what I'm doing up here in the top. Just assist in our marketing efforts. What kind of marketing efforts? Down here, I have no accept. I have no reject. I can't do anything. I shouldn't have to go into cookie settings and do everything. There's also no link to privacy policies here. And over here, this one might have just been strictly necessary, but if they had any marketing, I can't do anything. So, and it's also really hard to read. So the always active is a dark blue. This is really small text. I would encourage something a little bit different. So over here, just kind of some extras that you can kind of see. See, it has configure and it's okay. These are a bit of a dark pattern. I'm trying to be encouraged to go over here. This one is really, a lot of text that's here. And again, a bit of a dark pattern. The one on the bottom is a dark pattern, is not a dark pattern with the reject and the accept. So you could kind of review and decide, what do you think about this one? Just some more to kind of give you, other examples of how people are using it. So refuse everything. That's really different than just reject, right? And here I also have them already set off. So I'd have to actually go and make a decision as to what I would like to do. This one's also kind of fun where it has cookie politics. So I like that this one's making it a little bit fun and trying to help explain. We packed a lot into this webinar. I do see a couple Q&As. What we'll do is we'll review those and send out some answers from here. If you have any cookie conundrums and any other questions, we encourage you to reach out to us. We're so delighted that you joined us here today. And thank you so very much for participating. Like I said, the slides and the recording will be sent out, and we'll look at the Q&A and be able to drop it in. Thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of the day.